So, welcome to Unleashed Learning Radio. Now, if you and your school are working to strengthen student writing, there's a little secret to consider, and that's this. Focus on what writers say they actually do. That is, have students read about, listen to, meet, and discuss with actual writers to hear about their writing process. Why? Because writing is a craft, and listening to writers who are experts in their craft can help students and all of us become better at this craft. So to help that process, we've got Gayle Kennedy on today's show. Now, Gayle is a member of the Wongaiibon clan of New South Wales. She's a published and award-winning author. She's been a speaker at Happiness and Its Causes. She's been at numerous writing festivals and dreaming and local NAIDOC events. And she's here to share with you her writing process. I promise you, this is great stuff to know about, to use, and to learn. Here we go. Gayle, welcome to Unleashed Learning TV. I'm really excited you're here.
It's lovely to be here, actually. It's great.
Gayle, as we were talking about earlier, my professors in my doctoral program, or our doctoral program, always said, if you want to strengthen either students' writing or your writing, one of the ways to do it is talk to writers and hear what writers actually do. And so I thought, because you're a writer and you're writing and you're talking about writing inspired me so much, I wanted to feature you to help us all strengthen writing. So what I'd like to start off with, if it's okay, Gayle, is to ask you, why did you become a writer? How did that happen for you?
I felt ultimately that it was the only thing that I could do really well. I spent years and years and years in jobs I absolutely hated. I was not a team player. Um, I just didn't fit in no matter where I worked, and no matter how much money I made, I was just desperately unhappy. And I actually said to people, well, I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to be a writer, and I put it out there to the universe. And what I did was, I thought I really need to learn to pit myself against other people. I need to learn about sticking to a word count. I need to learn about meeting a deadline. So I started entering competitions with little short stories, and lo and behold, if I didn't start winning them. And one of the stories I wrote won what we call the Inner City Life competition. And I liked the characters so much, me, Ant-Man and Fleabag, that I just kept writing. And and believe it or not, within 6 weeks I had a book. And I sent it off to this competition at the Queensland Premier's Literary Award for an unpublished Indigenous writer. And it won that, which and the prize was publication with the University of Queensland Press and $15,000. And I mean, so it's actually been very charmed. And that book is still selling all these years later. But from that book came all kinds of other offers. I got an offer to write 10 graphic novels for Oxford University Press, which I did, and I write a lot for different anthologies. Growing Up Disabled in Australia. I've been published by a lot of many different publishers, and I do a lot of public speaking about writing, but also about disability. But it's been very charmed. I cannot offer any any stories of struggle, or it's wonderful, and it was obviously meant to be. I mean, I didn't publish my first book until I was 52, so I'm very much a late bloomer. And it's just gone from there. It's snowballed now, and I do workshops with people about writing as well, even though I actually don't have any any real qualifications other than I am a writer.
Writer. That's why we're
Yeah.
interviewing you here.
Right.
Just, and you said I didn't have the struggle was it sounds like you knew you were in the wrong place, and when you found the right place, you started to flourish. And so that's
Yes,
how it's a really great example of getting into congruency for what you did. So,
yes,
oh, sorry.
absolutely.
Can I ask briefly, like your writing process? Like, do you know where the book's going to lead? Do you have it all in your mind, or is it a process that as you write, it starts unfolding? So can you talk about the process for us?
With me, what happened with my first book was basically these characters kind of knocked on my door and came in for a cup of tea. And then next minute they're sleeping on my lounge and eating all my ice cream. And I basically found that the only way I could get rid of them was write them out of my head, and they wound up on the page. And that's basically my writing process. Is very much the book is or whatever I'm going to write is basically written
Mm.
before I finish it. I know how it's going to start. I know where it's going. I know how it's going to end. That's not to say I'm rigid about it, because characters can take you anywhere and everywhere. But I think the basic thing is that I've got my characters all set up, and I know where I want to send them and what I want them to do. And I know the way they're going to speak, the vernacular, the language they're going to use. They usually feature a dog somewhere along the line. But once it's written, I totally lose interest in it,
Mm.
because I feel as though it no longer belongs to me. It belongs to whoever's reading it, and they can interpret it any way they like. And some interpretations are really quite strange. And some people think that a lot of my writing is autobiographical, but it isn't at all. And unless you're a writer and you can really understand the imagination, it's hard to tell people that, no, I just made it all up. No, if I had a life like that, I wouldn't be sitting around writing books. But
It sounds like there's a relationship with the characters, and even
mm,
though you know where they're going to go, you can't be too structured and kind of still need to see where they're going to go, is what I'm hearing. And also I'm
yeah,
hearing like, and then I have to release it to the world because
yeah,
it's theirs now, not mine anymore.
yes, exactly. And I just don't know sometimes where. I mean, with my first book, I had no idea, apart from the opening story, which was the winner of that competition. I had no idea where they were going to go, but I knew that they were going to be going out bush, and they were going on a road trip. And yeah, and it was so much fun to write. And it just and like you said earlier, it was like I'd found the place that I belonged, which was writing.
Isn't that a wonderful statement? I found where I belong, which
Yeah.
is writing. So here's the hard part sometimes for writers, because I've entered lots of them and I'm a writer too.
Mm.
What is your revision process? Like a lot of times, do you do a draft and then let it sit for a while, or someone reads it, or how do you go through that revision process?
Um, to tell you the truth, I don't do a great deal of revision myself. I mean, I'll obviously read through it, and look at things like spelling or where I've left something out. But I've been very lucky in that I've worked with really good editors who who don't change a lot. But a good editor will point you in the direction where like something as simple as moving stories around, and the structure of the story. Like I had a lot of comedy in Me, Ant-Man, and Fleabag, but the editor said, can you write something basically that's going to tug at the heartstrings
Yeah.
and show us a little more about the inner workings of the narrator. And so I wrote a few things, that a few stories that touch on that, like grandfather's medals and the Silver Wedding Anniversary that touched on a lot of the history of Aboriginal people in this country and the way that we've been treated. And there's a lot of underlying sadness that a couple of people have said. I had to read it a couple of times to pick up on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think a lot of writers become too precious about what they write and don't really consider the reader. And that's where a good editor comes in. So I've been very lucky. I've worked with some really wonderful editors who don't change my storyline. And when I first submitted, when I first showed the book to a couple of other writers, they said it'll never work because it was written in the vernacular. And people aren't going to understand this, when you've got to do this, and this, and you're breaking the rules. I said, but I know the rules.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm breaking, and I'm deliberately breaking them. And so it is a matter of trusting your editor, and of course you've got wonderful proofreaders who'll go through and check spelling and everything. But I've been lucky in that I've never had to fight for anything.
Fantastic.
For anything that I write. They understand my vision and where I'm going and the story I'm going to tell. And a lot of what they talk about is the structure, how to lay out your stories and everything. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from editors, and I really encourage writers to not get too precious and to collaborate with an editor.
I used to do, from my doctoral work and professors I knew, with schools, a writer's workshop process. And that's what the ways you're describing that is. They would often say, I can't be too precious about this piece. I have to be open to what people are saying and then make some decisions about that kind of feedback. And so you had the right editors who you probably had a relationship with and trusted to give that feedback. So, okay, so here's my second to last question. And it's that, I've heard it said that people have said, other authors, that if you want to learn something, write a book on the subject, right? So if you want to actually learn something, write a book. What have you learned about yourself or through the act of writing? Have you learned stuff about yourself or the world because you've put pen to paper or typed?
What I have learned is I've learned to trust my instincts. I've learned a lot of discipline, which I've never had before. I am, by very nature, an undisciplined, hedonistic creature, really, and I had to rein myself in order to write. And I learned that I could do that quite easily. I learned that I could meet deadlines and word counts, and it has. I mean, I never ever thought, and I probably wouldn't have been able to write anything before I hit my 50s because I was a very undisciplined person. And I've learned that, and I always thought that was just me and I couldn't change. But writing has taught me that I do have the discipline and that I can work with other people when required. I am, as I said, I'm not a team player. I'll quite happily admit that. But I am capable of collaborating with people. And I also learned that I can get up on a stage and prattle on and talk about my book, which was something I had no idea I could do. But I found myself up on stage and I loved it, and I felt absolutely at home there. I thought, this is where I belong. So I learned that as well. It's given me more confidence in myself as a person as well, just to know that I can get up there on stage and hold an audience's attention was something I never ever thought I'd be able to do. But one thing that I stress to people that get up there on stage, if they ask me about it, is know when to cut and run.
Mm.
Too many people go on, and what starts out as being fascinating ends up with you sitting there going, are they ever going to shut up?
It's kind of like the revision process, isn't it? To
Yeah,
know
yeah,
how to cut back. And what I'm
yeah.
hearing you say is you learned. I'm assuming you type with a computer, but maybe it's
Yeah.
paper and pen. I don't know, but the metaphorically paper and pen or typing has really been a great teacher for you, and you found out stuff about yourself as well as the characters you developed, is what I'm hearing.
Yes, yes.
Oh, fantastic. And can I just say, you can hold an audience because I saw you on stage, and that's why we're here today, because I was so inspired by what you're talking about as a writer. I have one more question, if you don't mind.
Yes, that's fine.
Gayle, because I could talk to you for hours. My last question is, if you were to give advice to someone in regards to how to become a better writer, so maybe it is they're writing books or they're writing essays or they're writing whatever it is, maybe it's students, maybe it's adults, what would you say to us to help us become better writers?
Well, I think first of all, you've got to actually write. But I think that you really, really have to be passionate about what you're writing about. Even if you're only talking about how to, you know, put together a box, I mean, whatever you're writing about, you have to be passionate about it. You have to truly believe that this is really important, that what you're writing about is important. If it's important to you, then it's bound to be important to someone else.
Wow.
Um, it may not be many people, but someone else will read it and go, yes, yes, that's what I feel. That you have to actually believe in what you're writing about, and and as I've said, I think they call it kill your darlings. Um, so many people, writers I know, will spend hours constructing a sentence, like polishing it, holding it up to the light to see if it gleams. And then an editor will come along and say, look, that just doesn't work. And they will fight for it. And if it's not adding anything to the story, let it go. Pop it away somewhere, write a poem with it or whatever. But let it go. If it's not serving the story, let it go. Don't be precious, and take advice from professionals because they know. I mean, I've read quite a few books that have been self-published, and the self-indulgence is almost unbearable. And I find myself sitting there thinking, oh my God, if only they'd had a decent editor, what a great book this would have been. And another thing I have to say
Yes.
is your friends and your family are not editors.
No.
They don't, they're always going to tell you it's fabulous. I have never once shown a manuscript to anyone but a professional because so many people said, oh, but mum and dad and cousin Joe or Auntie Beulah, they all said it was fantastic, and now you're telling me, but and be, and get anything that you're going to submit to a publisher, um, get it to be as good as it can be, and don't be disappointed if you get a knockback. I think that the world is probably full of rejected manuscripts. And it's, I guess it would, I mean, I hope I don't sound like I'm bragging, but I've never had a rejected manuscript, but I'm sure, I know from other people that it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But I say to people, you just keep writing. If you love writing, you'll write anyway. And not everyone will be published. And, go down the self-publishing route if that's what you need to, if you desperately need to see your book in print. But if you're going to do it, and many good books have started out that way by self-publishing, but if you're going to do it well and engage a professional. and you just never know where it might lead you.
And look at, you're an example of where it's led to. So what a
Yeah.
great example. Well, we talk a lot about at Unleashed Learning, when you write it, you learn it. We teach a lot about the difference between writing to learn and learning to write. And I think this discussion's a great discussion about the power of writing, the impact it has on the individual and the wider world. And I really appreciate letting us in your inner world about yourself as a writer, that story, how you do what you do, and the impact it's had on yourself and our world. So thank you so much, Gayle.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
A pleasure. We will see you next time, and we're cheering you on.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
So now we've got a question for you. Our question is this: what's your biggest takeaway from Gayle's discussion on her writing process, and how would it benefit students knowing about this? Now, as always, some of the best conversations take place after the episode, so jump over to our blog, join the conversation, and together we can make learning, and in this case,